Hey, patrons, I am back with another chapter of Houston's book, Pretty Enough, the story of the gangbang queen. So, before I get into chapter 6, I just wanted to discuss this Moon Square Pluto aspect in her chart because that has a lot to do with her decision in terms of becoming a porn star. Because that Moon Square Pluto can result in sex dominating your life. It can result in being hypersexual and where the person could lack discretion as well, especially with that moon being in Gemini. And Moon Square Pluto can get her caught up in some nasty situations, I'll say. It can also result in being abused, and she definitely has already documented cases of that dealing with some of these men she's been involved with. Also, this makes her very concerned about sexual health because Pluto is in Virgo. All right, so let me get into chapter 6. So, chapter 6 is entitled The Prom Queen. A month or two after the Houston 620, I received a call from my publicist, Susan from Metro. She said that some kid in New York had been on the Howard Stern show and wanted to know if Howard Stern could help him get a date with me for the prom. I didn't even think about it. Hell yeah, I'll do it. Duh. With that, the arrangements started back east. I wish I could tell you about them as well as the controversy this caused, but since I wasn't there, it's hard to do so. So that's very much related to that Moon Square Pluto aspect as well, the controversy that resulted in her going to the prom with this boy because that moon's in Gemini and Gemini deals with school. Pluto is controversy. And with that Pluto in Virgo, that could deal with something that's inappropriate. But what about the boy, Houston? Why not just ask him what happened? Well, we'll get to that before the chapter is over. What I do know, though, is that the mainstream media certainly took notice. Jay Leno was joking about it on The Tonight Show, and Extra covered it before, during, and after. It was a big deal. The porn queen became the prom queen. For my part, I knew that I had to get a prom dress. I hadn't been to my actual prom, and no one had specified what I was supposed to wear exactly. So I decided to go with a beautiful black number designed by September Dawn. In truth, since I hadn't gone to mine, this was a bit of a special thing for me too. So June 19th came, the day of the prom. I hadn't even met the boy yet. I had heard that his name was Brad Parascandalo and that he lived in some part of New York City. I hadn't even heard of when I lived there with Daniel, an area called Staten Island. I flew in, stayed in Manhattan, then took a limo with a camera crew across the Verrazano Bridge to his house. When we got there, it was a mob scene. It was fucking crazy. Hundreds of people were camped out on his block waiting for my arrival. I knew Howard had been hyping this up, but I had no idea of how much. I stepped out of the limo, and everyone just swarmed around me as if I were the Beatles or something. It was a good feeling. Here I was, this Valley girl going to this total New York town. And then he showed up. Brad walked to the limo and escorted me to the front door. He pinned the corsage on me and smiled. He was a cutie. That was my first impression. He was very, very shy. He lived with his Nana, his sister, and his mom. They were very nice to me. Here I was, the woman who had been with 620 people in one day a few months ago. And while I felt there was a segment of the industry that looked down on me for that, I didn't feel any judgment coming from this family. His mom was so sweet to me. That's strange. I signed autographs for a long time before we left. Everyone just seemed to want to meet me. Finally, after doing some serious PR, we went to the prom. We were with a group of his friends who, thinking back on it now, remind me of the cast of Jersey Shore. I hadn't met any Guidos up until that point. These super tan, super buff, gold chain wearing kids were nice to me. way more respectful than you think when someone says the word Guido nowadays, but they were new. I hadn't seen anything like that out west. We got to the prom, and as you might guess, all eyes were on us. It made me feel a bit uncomfortable, but I'm sure it wasn't as bad for me as it was for the other kids who went to the prom. I mean, think of it. It's your big special day. You're with your Staten Island sweetheart, and then here comes Brad with his big porn star date in the black silk gown with rock star glasses, and no one's paying attention to you. You could wear a big flashing neon sign as a corsage that says, pay attention to me, and no one would. So her just harping about this attention again, that's her being a Leo rising. It wasn't really my intention to ruin it for anybody, but at times I felt like a big planet that just drew all of the little moons into its orbit. I remember we danced to Madonna's Crazy for You, but I don't remember many of the other songs. I got very self-conscious there. Unbeknownst to me, there had been a drive to prevent Brad from taking me, but legally they couldn't do shit to prevent us. I don't know if they thought I was going to try to get the entire student body to pull a train on me or whatever, but they tried and failed to stop us. We weren't breaking any laws. We danced, we ate, that's it. Finally, after a bit, when Brad could tell I wasn't 100% comfortable, he said to me, let's get out of here. We changed our clothes and headed out, but not before we gave his friends what they wanted. All of them were telling us to kiss. We said, okay, mwah. That was a big deal. His friends cheered and we headed out. So let me share my screen and show the picture of her with the prom date. Here it is right here. At least she came out looking rather presentable. I'll give her credit for that. And he looks very happy. Her also being a Leo rising can deal with her doing that for the kid and all that. All right, let me pull her chart back up. And with Sagittarius on the 5th and Jupiter conjoined to Uranus, Uranus ruling that 7th, that's like her taking a fan to the prom, or you can even say just to a party, but in this case, it was a prom. We drove back to Manhattan so we could go to a club. I don't remember many of the details, but I know one of his friends threw up in the limo when we were headed back to Staten Island. Besides that, not much happened after the prom. We didn't have sex or anything. He said goodbye and we had a really chaste, sweet hug before going our separate ways. A short time later, we did a follow-up on the Howard Stern show when I was in town for some feature dancing, and I invited Brad to stay with me at the Kenmore Hotel. He was very shy and young, but seemed nice and mature for his age. He was very polite, the type of politeness that comes only from being raised by women. He was very conscious of their needs, their wants. He was patient. He would wait for me no matter how long it took me to change my clothes. I was so turned on by him and I was so into him. I had no idea if he was going to be good or bad in bed, and I didn't care. I took his virginity that night at the hotel, and I don't think he was quite ready for that. He didn't last particularly long, but you can't blame him for that. I was so hot and bothered by him. It was like, come on, Brad, let's go. Again, her being a Leo rising makes a lot of sense because I can deal with where she is attracted to young men. After we gave his body a bit of rest, he was ready for the second time. This time, his stamina improved greatly. For a little while, whenever I danced in New York, I'd have Brad stay with me. His mother had come to really like me by this point, and that felt good. Finally, he and I decided it was a good time to move him to Los Angeles with me. Now, at first, it was great. He got along with Dallas, and he was there to take care of me physically when I needed it. See, right after he moved in, I went in for another boob job and a labiaplasty. As I had always been uncomfortable with how big my vaginal lips were, post-surgery, I woke up. Brad was there waiting for me, holding my hand. It was a very special feeling. So let's discuss this vaginoplasty in her chart. Now, her just having that Aries stellium in the eighth house, that can make her want to or even consider getting a vaginoplasty. And then Sun conjunct Chiron in particular can point to that because, you know, a wound is going to be created that has to heal and all that. And then she has this Neptune in Scorpio is making a trine with Chiron and the North Node. And you could throw that sun in there as well. And that basically deals with the actual procedure. There was something else dealing with that too. What was I looking at before? Also, this Neptune, quincunx, Venus, and Saturn can deal with the vaginoplasty too, because Neptune is ruling that eighth house, yeah. And with Venus conjoined to Saturn, that could deal with shortening or taking something away. Can also deal with where she had to lay off of sex for a minute so she could heal. All right, reading along. A few days after the surgery, I woke up, got out of bed, and bam, I immediately passed out on the floor. It turned out that one of my breasts had clotted and was filling up with blood, preventing the flow of blood to my brain. Okay, so let's look at that. So she has Mars in the fourth house, which can deal with the breast augmentation. And then they said there was some issue with blood flow. Sagittarius deals with the blood. And let me go back to what she said real quick. Let me get rid of that. She said, it turned out that one of my breasts had clotted and was filling up with blood, preventing the flow of blood to my brain. Wow. So that right there is Mars in Sagittarius, right here in the fourth house. Again, fourth house is the breast. And Mars is forming a sesquicent square with both Venus and Saturn in Aries. Aries rules the brain. And ninth house is blood. So, wow, that makes a lot of sense because those sesquicent squares could be a motherfucker. So, yeah, it's pointing to that. Interesting. All right, reading along. The breast swelled to the size of a watermelon. Brad called 911 and I was rushed into emergency surgery under Randall Hayworth again. I could have died had he not made that call. Later on, I discovered that Dr. Hayworth had initially suggested taking me to an emergency room instead. He was apparently too busy to take care of one of his patients and finally did, so only after much prodding. If that weren't enough, the surgery team chipped my tooth veneer while removing the throat catheter post-surgery, which shows a roughness and lack of medical finesse. To say the very least, that is unbecoming of people who took the Hippocratic Oath. So let's see. So say chip some of her tooth veneer. That's very Venus conjoined to Saturn in Aries. And that can be seen through that quincunx with Neptune and Scorpio. The lighter side of that was that when I got home, Brad was, of course, happy to see me, but he did crack up when I put on a pair of denim overalls. He told me that combined with the chipped tooth made it hard for him to keep a straight face because I look like Farmer John. So that first month was just Brad putting Neosporin on my vaginal lips with Q-tips and helping with Dallas. It wasn't a very romantic time, as you can imagine, but it was a loving time. Still, if anything, it was very stressful. Both of us were so wrapped up in the surgery and so new as a couple that we were scared. We were fearful. On top of everything, we were trying to decide what he was going to do. We were trying to get him to apply to ITT, but it didn't even get to that point, really. He only ended up staying with me for 3 months. I think had we been on a desert island together, everything would have worked out fine, but we weren't. So her getting in a relationship with a fan, again, that's very much that Jupiter conjoining Uranus and Libra. And she's a Libra South Node, so she's very relationship oriented. We were in the real world and it just didn't allow us to be. I supported him as much as I could when he was there, and I was already supporting my daughter and myself. I started to get somewhat resentful. That's when it really hit me. He was a little kid. He didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. He couldn't even go out and drink with me. When New Year's Eve came along, we couldn't go out. He couldn't get into any of the places I wanted to go. And when we did go somewhere, people knew our age difference. They stared. People could see it. This 18-year-old kid with a woman in her 30s. It started to make me really, really uncomfortable. He was like my little puppy dog. People kept pointing it out. He'd follow me without any action plan for where he wanted to go with his own life. He had no ambition and no journey, but a whole life ahead of him. He didn't even have an ID, and he looked pretty damn young, so we wouldn't even sneak him anywhere. We went to the AVN Awards that year, and I could hear the snickers. I could hear my fellow porn stars making comments. Then when we went to see Donna Summer together, I felt so uncomfortable. I didn't help matters any by doing as much meth as we were doing at the time. I was just so uncomfortable in my shoes because I was high. I was high because I was uncomfortable. And I had this young kid I had to take care of who was just as high as I was. He had no job and no car, and I was getting tired of supporting him, even if I did love him. I was tired of supporting him, my daughter, and myself, and everything else I love. Now, a lot of this issue is stemming from Neptune and Scorpio squaring her ascendant. So this square is basically pointing to her being so uncomfortable being with this kid and being seen out with him, and the snickers she was receiving at the AVN Awards and all that stuff. And then this whole T square is basically representing this whole situation. And basically she's realizing she's pretty much like in a stagnant place with this kid. Like he's not going anywhere. She's not really experiencing the lifestyle she wants to experience dealing with this kid. So it's like a situation of being stuck with that Taurus midheaven. And then let me see, she got Jupiter ruling that fifth house, again being conjoined to Uranus, which is her getting with the fan, but they're conjoined to the South Node. So it's showing that, good chance of that not working out, which it did. And also that fifth house deals with children as well. Also, her facing, the scandal that was created by taking this kid to the prom. That's Mercury opposition Pluto and the backlash that was being created. Also, Venus and Saturn quincunx Pluto as well, with Venus ruling that third house dealing with school. Libra on the third, that's very much indicative of the prom as well. All right, moving along. All right, so I wanted us, but it wasn't happening financially or emotionally. The stars weren't aligning. I was struggling trying to take care of my kid, and my bills were astronomical. Had I been a billionaire and able to say, fuck it, here's a Porsche, go have a good time, and fuck me whenever you want, things would have been great. But that's not how it was. I was making a good deal of money, but I wasn't paying my mortgage. That's that Neptune in the fourth in Scorpio. That's like her neglecting her mortgage, and that ascendant square in Neptune dealing with that kid's involvement and how it's kind of taking her off her square. Oh, she said, but I was paying my mortgage. She said, but okay, so that square is representing the strain she was feeling though, where she's like, okay, I got to take care of this kid and I got to pay my mortgage. So she said, but I was paying my mortgage, I was paying my nanny, and I'm a bit ashamed to admit I was also paying my dealer. So all of that, and Neptune in the fourth, that's her dealer too. The biggest problem, honestly, was that I had always been able to separate Houston and Kim. Kim was for my daughter, for home. Houston was for the public. And being with Brad made it impossible to be Kim, even at home. Okay, that very much is the Leo ascendant square Neptune in the fourth. I had to always be on so I could take care of him. I had always had to be ready to try to convince someone to let him in somewhere, or to explain away our age differences, or a million other things that I didn't need in my life. It was like Brad dated Houston. He never dated Kim. I wanted to be able to be Kim for my daughter. I've tried to find Kim for years. Also, the struggle with her being a mom, that's that moon square Pluto as well. At times, I don't even know who she is, especially her being Kim, and also Houston, that's representative of her Gemini moon. But I've tried to keep her tethered here, and it was too hard to do that with him around. After he left, we still spoke on the phone for a while. I tell him I loved him, and I go to New York and stay at his mom's place. We continue having a relationship like that for another year, on and off. Then I met my second husband on the Triple X vacation, and things ended between Brad and I. That marriage, by the way, only lasted 3 months. Thank God he signed a prenup. So she has Aquarius on the 7th house, and that can lead to multiple marriages. As much as I love Brad, he was just too young. He needed to get on with his life. He had no ambition with me around. I wanted him to be a man. I wanted someone who could say, I got you, babe. But instead, I was saying, I got him, and I got my nanny, and I got my child, and I got my mortgage. So again, with ascendant square Neptune, that Neptune is winning out, and she's about to kick this boy to the curb. Sometimes people would accuse him of being some sort of gold digger, there to leech off my fame. I don't believe he ever was. I was a contract girl. I could have gotten him a job in the industry, either in front of or behind the camera, but I didn't want to do that to him. I wanted him to blossom and experience the world as Brad. Sadly, in recent years, Brad became one of those people to turn on me due to what comes with being the kid who took Houston to the prom. When it came time to write this book, he out and out refused to help or give his side of the story. It's not as if his date with me weren't already a matter of public record, and I had no intention of saying anything embarrassing or negative about him. So her feeling like he turned on her, that's ascendant square Neptune as well. I know that he seems to have finally found some sort of ambition and is trying to become a firefighter in New York City. But he seemed to feel that participating in this book at all would be detrimental to his career and his person. So her attracting a dude that wants to be a firefighter, that's her sun in Aries. She also has that Venus in Aries. So when it came time to find out about the controversy surrounding the prom, he wouldn't cooperate. I could have always just used news sources from the time, but that's not giving you the full story. That's giving you the media slant. I would have loved to have Brad give his side, as many others did for the book. I would have loved to tell you about the East Coast buildup for the prom, but Brad at first didn't want to associate himself with me anymore, and then suddenly became too busy when I tried to talk to him. He wasn't too busy to be going to tailgate parties, according to his Facebook updates, of course, but too busy to help out here. And so while I wanted to finish this chapter on an up note, I have to face the fact that someone who once went out of his way to meet me and to include me on a special day in his life now sees me as a liability. So let me share my screen and pull up this image. So it says, Brad and I in Times Square in happier times. Like, she can't blame him for not wanting anything to do with that. Like, that was part of his sordid past. He might have children at this point. He may not want to relive that time in his life. So she really can't blame him. But that's very much Mercury and Pisces opposing Pluto and Virgo, him being tight-lipped, not wanting to provide any details, and her feeling betrayed in the process. Here she is right here with the butterfly tramp stamp. All right, so that concludes chapter 6. Let me know what you think in the comment section. I'll be back soon with chapter 7. Stay tuned for that. And I hope everyone is doing well. Peace.